Hartford, 1841. The autumn air carried a crispness that hinted at change, yet inside Trinity Church all was warm, bright, and filled with anticipation. Elellanena Peton walked with the pride of a matron whose family had long shaped Hartford's social elite. Her son, William, had chosen a bride she considered far beneath their station, a young Irish woman named Bridget O'Sullivan. Though outwardly radiant, Elellanenna's mind was a storm of resentment and meticulous planning. As William and Bridget processed down the aisle, Elellanena observed the congregation with a practiced eye. Many guests smiled at the bride's obvious joy, even the rigid Hartford matrons who rarely betrayed emotion. Her grip on her purse tightened as she imagined the Irish family creeping into her world, diluting the Peton name with foreign blood and Catholic traditions. Soon she whispered to herself, "This travesty will end." The ceremony unfolded with all the solemnity of an Episcopal service. Father Matthew spoke of devotion, mutual respect, and the sacred foundation of marriage. William and Bridget exchanged vows with clear, confident voices, their eyes locked in mutual admiration. Every word, every gesture of the young couple stoked Elellanenna's fury, yet she remained composed, the picture of a concerned mother-in-law. Beneath her poise, her heart raced with anticipation for the moment she had long rehearsed, the blessing of the wine. Rising with practiced elegance, Elellanena approached the altar as if to assist with the ceremony. "Allow me to help prepare the wine, Father," she murmured. The priest nodded, unaware of the deadly sack in her dress pocket. With movements perfected through countless rehearsals, she poured the white arsenic oxide into the deep red wine, stirring it gently until it dissolved without a trace. To the untrained eye, it remained a perfect vintage. To her it was the instrument of justice. Father Matthews lifted the chalice ceremonially. William and Bridget approached, hands joined, faces radiant. William sipped first, then passed the cup to his bride. Bridget raised it with both hands, smiling lovingly, unaware of the deadly dose she consumed in a moment of trust and celebration. Elellanena returned to her seat, chest heaving, eyes fixed on Bridget as she mingled with guests. Every laugh, every delicate sip of champagne, every lively conversation should have signaled the poison at work, but minutes ticked by without effect. 25 minutes passed. Bridget remained vibrant, engaging warmly with Hartford's elite. Panic gnawed at Elellanena. Had she miscalculated the dosage? Was the arsenic defective, or was this Irish girl simply impervious? Her carefully planned murder seemed poised to fail, and with it, the social order she had sworn to protect. The reception moved to the Peton mansion, its rooms adorned with autumn flowers and fine china. A lavish breakfast awaited, yet Elellena's attention was singular. Bridget, she watched the young bride accept congratulations, sip champagne, and eat delicacies without ill effect. 45 minutes since the poisoning, and Bridget remained unharmed. Desperation tightened around Elellena's chest. The perfect crime was unraveling before her eyes. She excused herself, retreating to her private study to rethink her failing strategy. Yet the house soon erupted in commotion. Calls for Dr. Harrison, the family physician, pulled her back into the public eye. Elellena's heart leapt. Perhaps the poison was slower than expected. She masked her relief with concern as she joined the group in the drawing room. Bridget sat pale and trembling, clutching her stomach. William knelt beside her, frantic. Dr. Harrison examined her, recognizing signs of arsenic poisoning, nausea, labored breathing, and confusion. Elellena's private victory seemed imminent. Yet as the doctor organized treatments to save Bridget, a new dread gripped her. If Bridget survived, her crime would be discovered. Her meticulously constructed world teetered on the brink. Vomiting was induced, milk and egg whites administered to absorb toxins. The poison, once her tool, now threatened her exposure. Each passing moment stretched Elellena's panic, forcing her to maintain the facade of a worried mother-in-law, while secretly hoping for the bride's demise. Harrison's professionalism and methodical attention were closing in. Evidence, timing, and access would soon reveal the truth. When his assistant returned from Trinity Church with the ceremonial chalice and remaining wine, Elellena's stomach knotted. Chemical tests confirmed the presence of arsenic. The deadly truth could no longer be hidden, and worse, Bridget's memory began to return. The young bride recalled someone stirring the wine during the blessing, someone who should not have been. Elellena's carefully constructed life, her fortune, her social standing, hung by a thread. In Bridget's eyes, she glimpsed the certainty of discovery, a certainty that would unravel the Peton legacy and shatter her own ambitions forever. Bridget's words cut through the tense air like a blade. The wine. There was something wrong with the wine, she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. Dr. Harrison leaned forward, his experienced eyes locking onto the young bride. What do you remember about it, Mrs. O'Sullivan? Bridget's gaze fixed on Elellanena Peton, and a chill ran through the matron's spine. I saw someone stirring something into the chalice while Father Matthews spoke, someone who shouldn't have been there. Her voice gained confidence with each word. Elellena's mask of composure began to crack, panic flaring in her chest. William recoiled as if struck. Mother, tell me this isn't true. You didn't. His voice broke, a mixture of horror and disbelief. Elellena's carefully maintained facade fell away. Every thought of social position, reputation, and the imagined ruin brought by an Irish daughter-in-law was exposed in that moment. The game is over, she said quietly, her voice strangely relieved. Your marriage, your children, they would have been outcasts, polluted by foreign blood. But William would not be swayed by her prejudices. Those children would have been half Irish, he said, his voice quivering with both grief and moral clarity. That would have mattered less than the life of the woman I love. And you tried to take that life for your narrow ambitions. Elellanena snapped. I would rather see the Peton line end entirely than watch it be polluted by alien traditions. But her words were met not with fear or awe, but with quiet determination. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Mrs. Peton, I must notify the Hartford constabulary. You have confessed to attempted murder in the presence of multiple witnesses. For a moment, she laughed bitterly, incredulous that the law might challenge her social power. But the reality was undeniable. Arsenic had been administered, the crime was deliberate, and her son's bride had survived. Nothing could shield her now. The trial commenced on November 20th, 1841, drawing unprecedented attention throughout Connecticut. Newspapers from Boston to New York followed every twist and turn. The spectacle of a prominent Hartford matron, accused of poisoning her son's bride, captivated the public imagination, exposing deep social tensions of the era. Judge Samuel Huntington, a member of Hartford's established elite, presided with strict impartiality. Though he knew Elellanena personally and understood her social concerns, the evidence was undeniable. Harrison's chemical analysis, Bridget's eyewitness testimony, and Elellena's own confession created an airtight case. District Attorney Charles Morgan presented the prosecution's argument as a calculated act motivated by social prejudice and personal ambition, a deliberate attempt to destroy an innocent life over ethnic and religious bias. Eleanor's defense attorney attempted to frame her as a mother driven temporarily insane by the threat to her family's social standing, yet the court found this defense implausible. The meticulous acquisition of arsenic oxide, the precise timing of the poisoning, and Elellenena's controlled behavior before and after the ceremony, all pointed to premeditation rather than a momentary lapse of judgment. Bridget's testimony struck the jury with its calm dignity. Recovered from her ordeal, she described the events of her wedding day with clarity and poise. I bear no personal hatred toward Mrs. Peton, she stated. I understand she acted out of love for her son, but she tried to kill me because she believed my Irish heritage made me unworthy. William's testimony was equally powerful. He spoke of his love for both his mother and his wife, and of the moral imperative to testify truthfully. My mother taught me to value honor, integrity, and moral courage, he told the court. Those same values require me to speak the truth, no matter how painful. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on charges of attempted murder. Judge Huntington sentenced Elellanena to 15 years in Connecticut State Prison, citing the severity of her crime while acknowledging her prior social standing and character. When prejudice and social ambition lead to attempted murder, he declared, the law must respond with appropriate severity to protect all citizens regardless of background or origin. Elellanena maintained composure as she was led away, never glancing at her son or the woman whose life she had tried to end. The Peton family's social position in Hartford was irreparably damaged. William and Bridget, ostracized by some but supported by a few progressive families, moved to Boston, where William built a successful law practice. Together they raised 3 children, bridging social divides and actively assisting Irish immigrants, ensuring that the legacy nearly destroyed by prejudice would instead flourish. Elellanena served 12 years of her sentence, released for good behavior, and she returned to Hartford a broken woman, living quietly in a modest boarding house until her death in 1858, never reconciling with William or meeting her grandchildren. The poisoned chalice was melted down, its metal donated to aid Irish immigrants. Trinity Church instituted strict new protocols for ceremonial preparations, ensuring such a violation would never occur again. The case of Elellanena Peton became a cautionary tale across New England, a stark reminder of how prejudice and social ambition could drive even respected individuals to commit unthinkable acts. And yet in the end, Hartford witnessed the triumph of love and justice. A nearly destroyed union flourished, and the courage of a young bride and the wisdom of a dedicated physician restored not only life but faith in moral and legal integrity. Years passed, and Hartford slowly moved on from the scandal that had shaken its social foundations, yet the memory of Elellanena Peton's attempted murder lingered in whispered conversations and the yellowed pages of local newspapers. Parents told their children of the perils of unchecked prejudice, while legal scholars studied the case as an early example of forensic medicine shaping justice. Harrison's quick thinking and insistence on scientific rigor had not only saved Bridget's life but had also established a model for investigating crimes that relied on medical evidence rather than rumor or conjecture. In Boston, William and Bridget flourished. William's law practice earned him respect across the city, while Bridget's work with Irish immigrant communities brought hope to families navigating the challenges of a new land. Their children grew up proud of their heritage, understanding both the dangers of prejudice and the power of compassion. Bridget, always graceful and intelligent, became a bridge between established families and newcomers, using her experiences to advocate for fairness, education, and opportunity. Back in Hartford, Elellanena lived a quiet, diminished existence. The grandeur of her former life had evaporated. Her wealth, reputation, and influence were shadows of what they once were. She rarely spoke of the crime she had committed, though those who glimpsed her in the boarding house noted a haunted, withdrawn figure, forever marked by the consequences of her ambition and hatred. The social elite of Hartford largely avoided her, unwilling to associate with someone who had attempted such a grave act. Despite the bitterness of her downfall, there were subtle lessons embedded in the tragedy. Hartford's society became slightly more introspective about its treatment of Irish immigrants and newcomers. The case had shown, in stark relief, how fear and prejudice could corrupt judgment, and it challenged families to reconsider their own biases. While change was slow, Elellena's crime had inadvertently forced a reckoning, shaping a more cautious and morally aware community. Bridget and William's family remained a living testament to resilience. On the 24th anniversary of the wedding in 1865, William returned to Hartford with Bridget and their 3 children. They visited the grave of Jonathan Peton, William's father, paying respects and reflecting on how far their lives had come. Observers remembered the scandal and were struck by the dignity, happiness, and social contribution of the family, who had survived a near-tragic beginning. Bridget, now in her early 40s with strands of gray threading her auburn hair, stood beside William silently. Though she never publicly forgave Elellanena, her quiet prayers at the cemetery suggested a personal peace, a release from the trauma that had haunted her marriage day. Her presence, serene yet strong, served as a reminder of the triumph of character, love, and perseverance over malice, prejudice, and social cruelty. The poisoned chalice, now melted down, became a symbol rather than a weapon. Trinity Church ensured it would never be used again, transforming it into a fund for Irish immigrants, a subtle act of justice and remembrance. Father Matthews, shaken by the violation of sacred ritual, instituted lifelong procedural changes, ensuring that sacred objects were never left vulnerable again. The story of Elellanena Peton's attempted murder became part of Hartford's cultural memory, cited in schools, courtrooms, and social discussions. It was a narrative that demonstrated the dangers of unchecked ambition and social intolerance, a dark chapter whose lessons were etched into the consciousness of a community striving for moral progress. The tale served not only as a warning about prejudice, but also as a testament to the courage of those who dared to act justly, even in the face of elite power and social hierarchy. By the end of her life, Bridget had built an enduring legacy, respected by all who knew her. Her family, once threatened by malice, became a symbol of integrity and resilience. And though Elellanena Peton faded into obscurity, her story remained a cautionary reminder. Wealth, status, and ambition mean little when confronted with the enduring forces of justice, morality, and human compassion. The poisoned chalice case, as it came to be known in newspapers, remained a topic of discussion in Hartford for decades, Families used it to teach their children about the dangers of hatred, while legal professionals studied it as an early illustration of forensic science in criminal justice. Ultimately, the case demonstrated that even the most powerful individuals were not above the law, and that moral courage, scientific expertise, and steadfast justice could overcome even the darkest human intention. In Hartford, the shadow of the tragic wedding lingered, but it was matched by the light of resilience and moral clarity. The union, nearly destroyed by prejudice, had instead flourished, showing generations that love, intelligence, and character triumph over hatred and fear. It was a story that transcended its time, a reminder that the deepest social divisions could be bridged by courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice. If you like, I can now combine parts 1, 2, and 3 into a single polished 1,400 word narrative, ready for publication, narration, or a YouTube script. Do you want me to do that next? You said part 4, chat, continuing the story by exploring the long-term impact on the community, the Peton family, and Hartford society. The tragic wedding, part 4, echoes through time. Decades after the trial, Hartford continued to grapple with the social tensions that had fueled Elellanena Peton's crime. Families still whispered about the scandal, but the tale had shifted from sensational gossip to a moral lesson. Legal scholars and historians referenced the case in essays and treatises, citing it as a turning point for forensic investigation and the emerging importance of medical expertise in criminal law. Harrison, whose testimony had been decisive, became a respected figure in both medical and legal circles, advocating for scientific rigor in both patient care and criminal investigation. His work helped lay the foundation for modern forensic medicine in the United States. Meanwhile, William and Bridget Peton's family thrived in Boston. Their children, educated and ambitious, carried forward the values of integrity, empathy, and resilience instilled by their parents. Bridget, ever mindful of her roots, continued to work with immigrant communities, establishing scholarships, mentorship programs, and charitable organizations that bridged social divides. William, balancing a successful legal career with family life, often spoke to civic groups about justice, equality, and the importance of moral courage in public and private life. Their household became a beacon of enlightened social conscience, showing that love and dedication could overcome prejudice and adversity. Back in Hartford, Elellanenna's later years were marked by reflection and isolation. Though she had once wielded considerable influence, the consequences of her actions had stripped her of status and fortune. Living in modest surroundings, she spent much of her time alone, ruminating on the choices that had led her to a prison cell and societal disgrace. Occasional visitors, curious neighbors, or distant relatives found her distant, wary, and haunted by the past. Despite her bitterness, she occasionally expressed a sense of regret, though never fully reconciliation. Her story served as a cautionary tale. The pursuit of social dominance at the expense of morality could exact the highest personal price. The silver chalice, melted down and repurposed by Trinity Church, became a symbol of accountability and remembrance. The church shared its story with parishioners, emphasizing the need for vigilance, integrity, and fairness in all ceremonial practices. Over time, the chalice's history faded from popular memory, but its symbolic meaning endured, a reminder that even sacred institutions were vulnerable to human ambition and prejudice, and that measures must be taken to protect innocence and uphold justice. Hartford itself was subtly transformed by the incident. While prejudice and social hierarchies did not vanish overnight, the scandal forced residents to confront their assumptions about immigrants, class, and morality. Families who had once dismissed Irish Catholics as outsiders began to recognize the value of merit, character, and contribution over birthright and social pedigree. Schools, churches, and civic organizations referenced the Peton scandal in discussions about ethics, fairness, and the dangers of allowing fear and prejudice to dictate action. The story of Bridget's survival became legendary, not merely because she had been poisoned, but because she had endured with dignity and grace. Her ability to forgive, maintain composure, and continue a life of service inspired those around her. The union, nearly destroyed by malice, instead produced generations of socially conscious and morally grounded citizens. Her children carried forward the lessons of justice, tolerance, and empathy, becoming influential figures in education, law, and civic activism. Even as Hartford's society evolved, the tale of Elellanena Peton and the poisoned chalice remained a touchstone. Parents recounted the story to impress upon children the perils of prejudice, ambition, and moral corruption. Legal and medical professionals cited the case in lectures and writings, emphasizing the integration of scientific investigation with justice. The incident transcended its immediate drama to become an enduring narrative about human nature, the capacity for cruelty, the consequences of social obsession, and the transformative power of courage and ethical conviction. By the 1870s, the Peton family had firmly established their reputation in Boston as a family of influence, integrity, and compassion. Bridget's legacy, in particular, was celebrated as an example of grace under adversity. Hartford residents who remembered the tragedy often contrasted the rise of the Peton family with the decline of Elellanena Peton, using the story as a moral compass. Prejudice and malice might tempt, but ultimately justice, integrity, and love endure. The poisoned chalice story, while rooted in the events of a single wedding day in 1841, echoed through decades, shaping attitudes, influencing legal and social practices, and teaching generations the dangers of letting fear, hatred, and ambition overpower humanity. It was a reminder that even in the most privileged circles, moral vigilance is essential, and that the courage to act justly can overcome even the darkest human impulse. As Hartford entered the latter half of the 19th century, the story of Elellanena Peton and the poisoned chalice remained firmly embedded in local memory. Though time softened the shock of the event, its lessons in law students, social reformers, and clergy cited the scandal as a vivid example of how personal prejudice could escalate into criminal behavior, and how vigilance, courage, and integrity were essential to protect the vulnerable. William and Bridget Peton, now firmly established in Boston, used their experiences to advocate for social inclusion and fairness. Bridget, whose bravery during the poisoning had saved not only her own life but also challenged systemic biases, continued to support Irish immigrants and other marginalized groups. She hosted gatherings for community leaders, using her social influence to build bridges between long-established American families and newcomers seeking acceptance. William, equally committed to justice, contributed to civic reforms and legal advancements that reflected the lessons he had learned from his mother's crime and the trial that had followed. The Peton children grew up with the story of their mother's resilience and the moral responsibility that accompanied privilege. Their education emphasized not only intellectual development, but also empathy, ethical judgment, and social responsibility. In adulthood, they became leaders in law, medicine, and social reform, carrying forward the principles of justice and fairness that had defined their parents' lives. Hartford, meanwhile, had slowly begun to confront its own social bias. Families who once prided themselves on exclusivity began to recognize the value of diversity, merit, and character over lineage or class. Elellanena Peton's downfall had served as a warning. Unchecked ambition, prejudice, and cruelty, even among the elite, could destroy lives, families, and reputation. Churches instituted stricter oversight of ceremonial practices, ensuring that sacred rituals could not be manipulated for personal gain. Legal professionals studied the case as a landmark in forensic investigation and as a cautionary tale about premeditated crimes within socially powerful families. Elellanena herself lived out her remaining years quietly and in relative obscurity. Her release from prison did little to restore her influence or social standing. She remained estranged from William and Bridget, never reconciling with the family she had sought to control. Observers noted her bitterness and isolation, though some sensed moments of reflection and regret. Her story became a quiet testament to the consequences of allowing fear and prejudice to guide one's actions, and it was recounted with a mixture of fascination and moral instruction by Hartford residents for decades. The poisoned chalice, melted down and repurposed by Trinity Church, stood as both a literal and symbolic reminder. Objects of tradition could be misused, but vigilance, ethical oversight, and courage could prevent tragedy. The narrative of that fateful wedding, an attempt at murder born of prejudice, had instead become a story of survival, moral triumph, and social evolution. Ultimately, the legacy of the tragic wedding was twofold. It highlighted the dangers of allowing social tension, fear, and ambition to dictate one's morality, and it celebrated the power of integrity, courage, and love to overcome even the most calculated malice. The Peton family flourished, bridging social divides, fostering empathy, and demonstrating that personal character matters more than social pedigree. Hartford, scarred but wiser, learned that justice, vigilance, and compassion were essential to the health of its community. The story of the poisoned chalice endured as a reminder for generations. Hate and prejudice may drive some to terrible acts, but virtue, courage, and moral integrity can triumph, leaving a lasting impact that echoes far beyond the moment of crisis. Decades later, Hartford still whispered the story of the wedding that nearly ended in tragedy. Children grew up hearing it as a cautionary tale, how unchecked prejudice, social ambition, and fear could drive even the most respected individuals to attempt the unthinkable. Elellanena Peton became a figure of both infamy and fascination. Her crimes, studied in law schools, cited in moral lectures,
and retold in countless local histories.
Meanwhile, the Peton family continued to flourish. William and Bridget's descendants carried the lessons of that October day in 1841 with them, instilling in each generation a sense of justice, empathy, and social responsibility. The family's prominence grew not through social manipulation or inherited wealth alone, but through a legacy of courage, integrity, and service to the community. Bridget's work with immigrant aid organizations reshaped the way Boston and surrounding communities viewed newcomers, and her example became a quiet beacon for fairness and compassion. The church, too, reflected on the incident. Father Matthews, deeply shaken by the violation of a sacred ceremony, instituted permanent reforms in ceremonial procedures. From that point forward, multiple witnesses oversaw the preparation of sacramental elements, ensuring transparency and safeguarding the sanctity of religious rites. The melted silver chalice became a symbol not of tragedy, but of vigilance, resilience, and moral rectitude. Historians note that the tragedy and near loss of life at the wedding mirrored the broader social tensions of the era. Anti-immigrant sentiment, rigid social hierarchies, and fear of foreign influence were rampant in 19th-century New England. Elellanena crime, though extreme, illuminated the destructive potential of prejudice and social anxiety. Conversely, the Petons' survival and ultimate success demonstrated the enduring power of love, courage, and principled action in the face of hatred. Visitors to Hartford's historic sites often pause to reflect on the story of that wedding day. The streets, churches, and graveyards of the city serve as silent witnesses to the collision of ambition, prejudice, and morality. Though the city has grown and changed, the moral of the tale remains timeless. Fear and hatred can drive people to commit unspeakable acts, but truth, justice, and the resilience of the human spirit can overcome even the darkest intention. In the end, the legacy of the poisoned chalice was not destruction, but transformation of a family, a city, and the social consciousness of an era. Hartford's elite may have been shaken, but so too were their hearts awakened to the need for compassion, fairness, and vigilance. The story reminds all who hear it that history is shaped not just by wealth and status, but by choices ethical, courageous, and just, that endure far beyond the moment of crisis. By the mid-19th century, Hartford had begun to forget some of the specifics of that fateful wedding day, but the story remained a cautionary tale, whispered in parlors and discussed in classrooms. Elellanena Peton, once a figure of social prominence, had become a symbol of the destructive power of unchecked bias, her name synonymous with envy, prejudice, and the consequences of letting fear dictate action. Her brief return to Hartford after prison was met with quiet curiosity rather than confrontation. The city had moved on, but the scars of her crime lingered in collective memory. For William and Bridget, life unfolded in stark contrast to the darkness of that wedding day. Their love endured, tempered by adversity, and their family thrived, rooted in principles of compassion, integrity, and justice. Bridget's resilience, intelligence, and grace earned her admiration in Boston society, bridging gaps between established families and Irish immigrants who had once been viewed with suspicion. The Petons' children and grandchildren carried forward this dual legacy, the memory of danger narrowly escaped and the promise of moral courage rewarded. The poisoned chalice itself, once a symbol of betrayal, had been melted down by Trinity Church, its metal donated to aid Irish immigrants, a subtle transformation of harm into hope. Clergy and parishioners learned to safeguard their rituals with vigilance, understanding that even sacred ceremonies could be violated when human greed and prejudice went unchecked. Historians later emphasized the wider social context of the crime. Elellanena''s actions were not merely those of a villainous matron, but a mirror of societal anxieties of the time, anti-immigrant sentiment, fear of social change, and the belief that heritage dictated worth. The trial, widely covered in newspapers from Boston to New York, became a lens through which New Englanders examined their own prejudices. Legal scholars studied the case as an early example of forensic investigation intersecting with social morality, a testament to the growing power of science and reason in judicial proceedings. Ultimately, the story of the tragic wedding became less about murder and more about transformation. It revealed the consequences of allowing fear, pride, and hatred to guide one's actions, but it also illustrated the enduring capacity for justice, love and integrity to prevail. Hartford's elite were reminded that power and privilege offered no immunity from the law, and the Peton family's survival demonstrated that love, courage and moral clarity could overcome even the darkest plot. Generations later, the tale remained alive in Hartford folklore, a story of near tragedy, human frailty, and redemption. Parents would recount it to their children, urging them to judge others by character rather than heritage. Legal scholars would reference it as a turning point in the development of forensic medicine, and historians would note it as a stark reminder that societal prejudice, if left unchecked, could drive people to unthinkable extremes. In the end, the tragic wedding was both a warning and an inspiration, a story of how darkness can be confronted and overcome, and how the choices of the courageous can shape the course of history long after the scandal itself has faded. Decades after the events, the story of Elellanena Peton and the near-fatal wedding remained a reference point in Hartford and beyond, not just for its sensational drama, but for the moral and social lessons it carried. Scholars and journalists alike continued to examine how fear, prejudice, and obsession could drive even the most seemingly respectable individuals to commit acts of extreme violence. The poisoned chalice became a metaphor in New England discourse for the hidden dangers of intolerance, and cautionary tales drew connections to the wider societal tensions of the 19th century: classism, religious prejudice, and xenophobia. For the Peton family, the legacy of that day was both a shadow and a light. While William and Bridget's lives flourished, they never forgot how close they had come to losing everything. They instilled in their children a deep awareness of human fallibility, but also the importance of moral courage and standing up for justice, no matter the personal cost. Their descendants carried forward these values, maintaining the family's reputation not through social maneuvering but through character, empathy, and service to others. Trinity Church, where the attempted murder had taken place, implemented permanent safeguards for all ceremony. The melted chalice that had once symbolized betrayal was repurposed to aid Irish immigrants, a subtle act of restitution that reflected a community's ability to transform harm into good. Clergy and congregants remained vigilant, aware that sacred rituals could be violated if human malice was ignored. Historians later noted the trial of Elellanena Peton as a turning point in forensic medicine and legal procedure. Harrison's meticulous investigation showcased the application of scientific rigor to criminal justice, paving the way for future cases where evidence rather than reputation determined guilt. The trial demonstrated that societal position could not shield one from accountability, a principle that resonated far beyond Hartford's elite circles. In classrooms, law seminars, and civic discussions, the story was retold as a stark example of both the dangers of unchecked bias and the triumph of ethical courage. Parents reminded their children that prejudice, fear, and ambition could distort judgment, but integrity and compassion could prevent tragedy. The narrative endured because it was not merely sensational, it was instructive, revealing that the human capacity for both malice and heroism shapes the course of history. The Petons returned to Hartford in 1865, decades after the scandal, symbolized reconciliation with the past. Observers saw a thriving family whose marriage had almost ended in death, now standing as a testament to resilience, love, and justice. Bridget's quiet composure, William's steadfast moral clarity, and the community's gradual recognition of their virtues demonstrated that while evil may strike, goodness, when nurtured, endures. Ultimately, the tale of the tragic wedding transcended its era. It became not only a story of attempted murder, social prejudice, and scandal, but also a reminder that choices made in moments of fear or bias have consequences that reverberate across generations. It urged society to confront its own prejudices, embrace justice, and value human dignity above social hierarchy. The poisoned chalice may have once threatened to destroy a young woman's life, but in the end, it became a symbol of triumph over hatred, a lesson etched in Hartford's history, and a story whose echoes continue to resonate in discussions of morality, justice, and human courage. Even decades after the trial, the events of that fateful wedding in Hartford continued to reverberate. Elellanena Peton, once a prominent matron of society, became a cautionary tale whispered in parlors and schools alike. Her attempt at murder, driven by fear of social change and prejudice, served as a stark reminder that even the privileged could be consumed by obsession and hatred. Families recounted her story to teach younger generations about the destructive power of bigotry, the limits of social ambition, and the moral imperative to act with integrity.
Bridget and William's legacy, by contrast, flourished as a testament to resilience and the enduring power of love. Their children grew up in Boston, educated in the values of fairness, compassion and respect for all people regardless of origin. Bridget's work with Irish immigrant communities bridged social divides, showing how empathy and action could counteract the prejudice that had once threatened her life. William's legal practice became a model of justice, guided by principle rather than privilege, and together, they raised a family whose lives embodied the triumph of virtue over malice. Hartford itself was changed. The scandal forced many established families to confront their own biases and assumptions. The city's elite, long accustomed to a rigid social hierarchy, began slowly acknowledging the humanity and worth of immigrant communities, recognizing that fear and prejudice could blind even the most cultured citizens. Clergy, educators, and civic leaders cited the poisoned chalice incident in sermons, lectures, and civic discussions, emphasizing that moral courage and scientific reasoning must guide decisions, not social prejudice. Even Harrison, whose quick thinking had saved Bridget's life, continued to shape his field. His pioneering use of forensic science in the investigation became a foundational example for medical and legal practitioners. The case proved that meticulous observation, careful documentation, and scientific methods could reveal truth and protect the innocent, regardless of social pressure or status. As the 19th century progressed, the story of the tragic wedding endured as more than historical curiosity. It became a parable of human fallibility and justice, reminding generations that unchecked fear, ambition, and prejudice could destroy lives, but that courage, empathy, and moral clarity could restore them. Visitors to Hartford who knew the story often paused at the old Trinity Church, imagining the silent tension of that October day, and at Jonathan Peton's gravestone, reflecting on the enduring legacy of love, resilience, and justice. Though Elellanena Peton's life ended quietly and broken, the lives she sought to control and destroy prospered. The poisoned chalice, once a symbol of malice, was melted down, transformed into aid for Irish immigrants, and ultimately became a symbol of restitution and hope. The moral of the tale was clear: the poison of hatred and prejudice can threaten life and legacy, but compassion, integrity, and courage can overcome even the darkest intention. And so, the story of Hartford's tragic wedding remained, not merely as a record of a crime, but as an enduring lesson that love, justice, and human dignity endure, even when confronted with the most calculated malice. Years after the trial, Hartford slowly moved past the scandal, yet the memory of Elellanena Peton's crime lingered like a shadow over its elite circles. Parents told their children the story not as gossip, but as a lesson in morality, that wealth, status, and privilege do not exempt anyone from the consequences of hatred and wrongdoing. Elellanena herself became a cautionary figure, cited in discussions about the dangers of allowing fear and prejudice to dictate one's actions.
Bridget and William, meanwhile, built a life defined by love, resilience, and social conscience. Their Boston home became a hub of both legal innovation and charitable work. Bridget, having survived an attempt on her life, turned her experience into advocacy, helping Irish immigrants navigate the challenges of a new society. She spoke of tolerance, education, and opportunity as antidotes to the fear that had once motivated Elellena's crime. William, too, carried forward the lessons of his family's scandal, ensuring that fairness and justice guided both his law practice and his family life. Their children grew up aware of the shadow of the past, but inspired by the courage of their parents. They learned that integrity and empathy were more enduring than social status or prejudice. The Peton family, once nearly torn apart by a mother's obsession, became an emblem of societal progress, demonstrating that love, reason, and moral courage could overcome fear and malice. Trinity Church memorialized the event subtly. The poisoned chalice, melted and repurposed for charitable causes, became a quiet symbol that even objects once associated with harm could be transformed to serve humanity. Clergy and historians alike referenced the incident to remind their communities that sacred ceremonies, like life itself, could be threatened by human cruelty, but also safeguarded by vigilance, morality, and science. In the broader context of Hartford, the scandal challenged long-standing prejudices. Elite families began to reflect on their assumptions about social hierarchy and immigrant community. Public discourse increasingly emphasized fairness and merit rather than ancestry or wealth, and the city slowly became more inclusive as a result. Ultimately, the tragic wedding of 1841 endured in memory not only as a tale of attempted murder and scandal, but as a narrative of moral awakening. It proved that even the most calculated malice could be overcome by courage, integrity, and compassion, and that justice, though delayed, could restore balance. The story remained a powerful reminder that human ambition and fear can drive people to unthinkable acts, but love, reason, and justice will always endure.